On Life and Meaning is brought to you by Blumenthal Performing Arts, celebrating its 25th year presenting the best in the performing arts, sharing and employing the arts as a major catalyst to strengthen education, building community cohesiveness, and advancing economic growth. Further support is provided by Foundation for the Carolinas, inspiring philanthropy and empowering individuals to create a better community. And by the Arts and Science Council, Charlotte-Mecklenburg's resource hub and lead advocate for the regional cultural community, providing culture for all.
I believe that there is something up there, some kind of higher energy, and I kind of feel like we keep coming back around. I don't necessarily know if it's reincarnation per se, but that we are becoming godlike, that we are learning lessons each time, and that we travel with the same souls and kind of make deals and swap, before we come back around to say, hey, can you help me with this in this lifetime? And so I'm very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with the idea that this isn't the only chance we're getting. And we just keep coming back as energy and figuring this out and evolving as a soul and becoming better people.
Amy Aussieker is Executive Director of Envision Charlotte, a public-private collaboration leading an effort to make the city of Charlotte a global smart city. Before joining Envision Charlotte, Amy served as a strategic consultant for businesses in marketing, fundraising, social media, and public relations. She served as a business development and community affairs executive for a commercial construction company and as group vice president for sales and marketing for the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce, where she was responsible for leadership, fundraising, and community relations. She has started multiple businesses, including Fabo Coffee Art Bar and Tank's Tap Craft Beer Bar. In this episode, we explore smart cities, the circular economy, idea generation, reincarnation, and evolving as a soul. I'm Mark Paris, and this is On Life and Meaning. Amy, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You are Executive Director of Envision Charlotte. What is Envision Charlotte?
Envision Charlotte is a nonprofit that's focused on sustainability and smart city projects for the city of Charlotte. And I like to kind of say we're the convener. So we bring together the public-private plus partnership. So you've got public, private, but the plus is the university and the utility. And bringing all of those entities to focus on projects and find win-wins for all of us. So we used to focus on kind of 4 pillars: energy, air, water, and waste. Our first major project was around energy. We've sort of bucketed those into 2 kind of projects that we're working on, which is the CAP, which is a Sustainable Energy Action Plan for the city. That's kind of transportation, air, water, and energy. And then you have our other side, which is the circular economy and waste.
What is the core mission of Envision Charlotte?
Well, we are seeking to create one of the most sustainable cities in the country, or in the world, actually.
And what do you mean by sustainability?
Well, we look at sustainability in a couple ways. We look at it as obviously being good stewards of the planet, but by doing that, becoming a more efficient city for its citizens, so that if you use less energy, obviously you have less emissions, and that's great for the planet, but it also is less expensive for you. So it's really looking at sustainability through, they always talk about the triple bottom line, but we really look at it as a partnership for the city, the groups that are in it, and the citizens.
How does Envision Charlotte go about its work?
So we like to bring together all the different groups and look at innovative projects that would create a more sustainable, efficient city, but doing it in a way that all of us win. So, for example, the first project that we did was led by Duke Energy, and that's really who birthed us out. So it was Duke Energy, Center City Partners in the city got together and said, we want to have a sustainability initiative for Charlotte. So they decided to focus on energy, and they wanted to focus on Uptown. So they looked at the where you could make the biggest difference. And really that's in big commercial buildings. So they said, all right, let's focus on the 64 largest commercial buildings, any building 10,000 square feet or larger, and let's drive energy use down in those buildings by 20%. Now, what that's going to do, that's going to drive emissions down, but it's also going to make it cheaper to do business in Charlotte. So you're going to attract more businesses. It was an interesting area for Duke to look at because they wanted to look at the behavior of individuals and could they make a difference there. So it was a pilot project for them. The university came in and really managed the data. So you had like all of the different groups as a piece of it and really all had a stake in the success of the project.
The work of Envision Charlotte has evolved since that initial project. How so?
Well, that project really kicked it off, and we had huge success. So with that project, we saw a 19% reduction in those 61 buildings. And by the way, those 61 buildings all signed an energy pledge to reduce their energy use and put shadow meters in the building. It's like unheard of. Other cities just, they aren't that collaborative. So that was big for us. So we saw a 19% drop in energy use, which translates to $26 million in savings for those businesses and about 11,000 cars less on the road if you equate it to emissions. So that really got us going and that kind of collaboration. So we expanded from just energy to look at water, air, and waste. And at the time, we were looking at it very siloed, like, okay, now what can we do with water? And we were looking at water in those buildings and trying to do the same sort of thing. Like, can we drive down water use in those 61 buildings? Those buildings are pretty efficient around water. There wasn't going to be the savings in water nor the financial savings. So since then, the work has really evolved into putting them into kind of two buckets. Like I said, the CAP, which is a Sustainable Energy Action Plan that the city will really roll out over the next year around how can you support the Paris Climate Accord goals and looking at an interim goal of 2030, reducing our emissions to 7.5 tons per person down from where we are at 11, with the ultimate goal of under 2 tons per person by 2050, which is the global Paris Climate Accord agreement. So that's the one bucket. The other bucket is waste. And so really looking at our waste stream different. There have been articles recently in the paper talking about recycling and how recycling is a big challenge for the U.S. China isn't taking our materials. And I joke when I travel around the world and I talk about the land of plenty. We've got plenty of land to throw it into the ground. And that's not a sustainable, nor is it a practical long-term solution. So those are the kind of where our work has evolved into those two sort of buckets.
Amy, let's talk about the land of plenty. Isn't energy relatively cheap and becoming cheaper?
Yes. And it's relatively super cheap in Charlotte. So if you look at Charlotte compared to California, it's a huge difference. So yes, we have cheap energy, we have cheap water. So that is, it makes it difficult to get people to change their behaviors around energy. But that doesn't mean you don't want to focus on it and really drive emissions down long term. So we focus more on the side of the long-term effects around the mix of energy coming onto our grid. But it makes it challenging. When you look at the resiliency of other cities, typically they're looking at energy or they're looking at droughts, hurricanes, earthquakes. We sit in a really sweet spot. And I think long-term you'll see more people moving to Charlotte or this part of the country because we don't face the same challenges other cities. So our resiliency is much different than I think any other city when you look at it.
It is a supply and demand equation. Isn't there greater impact managing the supply side than the demand side? The amount and type of clean energy being produced on the supply side versus trying to change consumer behavior on the demand side.
You need both. So if you look at the EU, for example, and you look at some of the cities over there, cities will work to electrify the grid, making ways for electric vehicles, making ways for houses to have electric charging. You need that side. So you need the city and you need the people on that side. At the same time, you do need the utility to be looking at different energy sources. So if you look at North Carolina, as I mentioned earlier, we have 11 tons per person. The national average is 17 tons per person of CO2. That's because we have a lot of nuclear on our grid. So Duke's doing a fairly good job of getting cleaner energy onto the grid. There's also technologies that are coming online. So while renewable energy, solar energy is fantastic, wind energy is fantastic, there are still technology issues that have to be worked out around that. Duke will tell you that the highest demand on the grid, peak demand, was at 7 o'clock in, I think, February. Well, there's no sun at 7 o'clock in February, and everything needs to power on. So you're talking storage. So we're still going through the technology changes that are needed around that. But I think Duke's commitment long-term to looking at different energy sources, we have new bills that have come out that you will see more solar on the grid. So we're heading in that direction.
Is Envision Charlotte working for Duke Energy?
No, we're a partner with Duke. So we work collaboratively with them. They work collaboratively with the city. I know that, they don't necessarily have the best reputation at times, but I have found working with them that it's been a great experience. And they have challenges. They are a regulated market. And so therefore they have rules and regulations that I think the lay person probably doesn't realize. But I think that they're making great strides in this area, and they're committed to it.
Is your agenda the same as the agenda of Duke Energy?
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. And I think that's where Envision does a really good job of bringing everyone to the table and saying, what can we do together? Because it's not everything. And yes, they are a business. They have shareholders. They have to answer to their shareholders. I have to answer to my board. The city has to answer to the taxpayer. So everyone has different people that they have to appease. So I think it's finding where we can collaborate together. And I think there are lots of opportunities.
Let's talk about smart cities. What smart technologies are we seeing in cities today?
So I would say that most cities are looking at sensor technology and the Internet of Things and are kind of around gathering data and using data. So an easy example of a sensor would be if you go into a parking garage and the parking spaces that are open have a light on above it so that you drive directly to an open parking space. And then that data is also fed through of how many cars are parking, how many available spots there are on a lot. That's an easy technology example around what smart cities are doing.
I'd like to read this quote to you. Becoming smart is a trendy thing for cities to do. But when a city can claim to be smart with a project as basic as replacing sodium lamps with LED bulbs, it begs the question just what is meant to be a smart city. What does a smart city mean to you?
Well, if you really look at smart city, it's kind of a marketing ploy. IBM, I think, was the first probably who said smarter cities. And it started with the technology providers really getting on this marketing idea, you want to be a smart city, don't you? Well, you need to buy this technology and be a smart city. And it was really the providers pushing solutions onto cities. And then in the last couple years, you've seen cities go, no, I want to be a smart city. But what does that mean to me? What are my challenges within a city that then I can take technology and apply it to? And I actually think there's a sense of relief between both the providers and cities, that the provider's like, oh, good, tell us what you need and we can develop it for you. And cities are really looking at it and saying, what do we need to be more sustainable, be more efficient, be smarter? So we look at it as technology and data to make more sustainable, efficient cities. That's our definition. You could probably find, if you Google it, 10 pages of definitions of smarter cities.
What would you like a smart city to mean?
Wow. Well, that's a challenging one because it could be so broad. For me, I think you really using technology to be more efficient. And you have to find the sweet spot on how much you're going to invest and what the outcome is. So I think that cities can get a lot smarter on transportation. I think that there's a lot of congestion. You can have smart light systems, stoplights and so forth. Cars are going to get smarter. You're going to have a lot more automated cars. I've been in all these meetings lately talking about when is it going to flip over to driverless cars and when are we not going to be driving anymore. So you look at these cities who are widening highways or spending tons of money on parking garages. When you go to these other meetings around, that the National Science Foundation are having, they're saying we're going to have automated cars and you're not going to need that. So what's the tipping point? But I think transportation really is where I think smarter cities should go. It's more efficient, less emissions, saves time, saves costs. So that's where I would like to see cities head towards around being smarter.
What about the human element of being a smart city? Education, governance, social mobility. Should those aspirations and concepts be part of what is meant by a smart city?
I think they can be. I think it depends on what organization you're working with and what their focus is. I will tell you that one thing that when Envision first started, and I applaud the leaders and the founders of Envision, they called all these different cities and said, what are you doing around sustainability projects? And one of the things they heard back was, don't try to be all things to all people. Narrow your focus and you'll be more successful. So that's why they started. They said, all right, we're going to focus on these commercial buildings, 64 of them, and we're going to see results. So I think sometimes the problem is if you take it and you're like, well, smarter should be people and it should be, yes. But does that mean one organization should take all those pieces? I think lots of organizations need to take lots of bites. I think you're going to be more successful than one organization trying to do it all.
Amy, the organization is called Envision Charlotte. What is the Charlotte that you would like to see?
Well, I love the Charlotte that I'm in right now. I think one of the special things about Charlotte is the collaborations that people get together and say, we're going to do this, and they do it. And I think that we have a ton of opportunities around, as I said, we're the land of plenty, but how do you make sure that you are creating a culture that allows all kinds of people to come in, not just diversity around skin color, but background and where they come from, but ideas and innovation. And I would like to see our city become a little bit more embracive around the fact that we are a sustainable city, but also around innovation. I think we've got some of the brightest people here, and not only bright individually, but when you bring those different people together, you can see some really magnificent things come out of this city. So it's hard because I love where we're at now, and we're on such a great track that I think if we just keep heading down that and keep adding to it, we could be greater and greater year over year.
In 2015, the Obama administration recognized Envision Charlotte and encouraged Envision Charlotte to scale, which led to Envision America. What was that initiative, and what is the status of that initiative now?
Yes, that was a very exciting time. I actually think I was on the beach when I got the call from the White House. And the guy who called me from the White House, his name is Dan. And so we always joke that Dan from the White House called. I'm talking with Dan from the White House. But anyway, they wanted to launch a smart city initiative, kind of get in on that wave. And they really wanted to see cities implement smart city solutions quicker. And they saw what we had done with the energy program and our collaborations and said, hey, would you guys be willing to be a part of this initiative and scale, go to other cities, teach other cities? And we laughed and said, staff of 2, it's a little challenging. So what we did instead is we worked with them on a program of, would there be a way for, again, that win-win, to bring cities to see what we're doing here and to talk with partners, show off our city, and help cities implement programs. And one of the things that people, especially cities, would always say is you go to all these conferences and you listen to panels, but nobody was actually sitting down and figuring out how to implement these programs. So with the White House's help, we designed a 3-day boot camp where we selected 10 cities to come to Charlotte to learn what we were doing. Also, all of the federal government, what programs they might have to help enhance it. We brought in facilitators. So I had 10 facilitators, all of our corporate partners, and to sit down with these cities, and they built a roadmap on how to implement their smart city projects. So it was enormously successful in terms of cities loving this kind of attention. It was great for Charlotte because we got a ton of attention. It was great for my partners because they got to see what cities were doing and what kind of future trends were coming out of it. So we held the first one in 2016. The federal government, like I said, was fully involved. So they were here, the transportation, commerce, Department of Energy, so they could really give funding or have funding opportunities for the cities. So we did it the first year. The administration changed the next year. And a lot of the sponsors I had wanted nothing to do with the federal government and the White House. They wanted all the language stripped from Envision America, like the first year, to not include the federal side. So we did that. At the same time, HB2, the North Carolina law, went into effect, which lots of cities came out and said that they would not travel to North Carolina because of HB2. So it was so challenging to try to get cities to even apply and how they could come here with HB2. We looked at moving it, but part of it was to really show off what Charlotte was doing. So we really struggled through that second year, pulled it off, still had good cities, still had good partners, but really wasn't, what the Obama White House had led. So this year, we had talked about doing it again and doing it in a more international way. But we have a new initiative we were launching, and we said, well, let's put it on hold because the last year was so challenging. Let's get this new initiative going. And then once we get it rolling, we can then bring in the cities to show off what we're doing around that.
Amy, let's talk about that new initiative. What is the Innovation Barn?
Ooh, it's such an exciting project. The Innovation Barn is a project between us and the city to embrace the circular economy. And the circular economy is basically a zero-waste society. So if you think of it in terms of a forest, a tree grows, it dies, it rots, it nutrients the ground, and new things grow. That's a circular economy. We are a linear economy. You buy a cell phone, you use it, you throw it in the landfill. You buy a new cell phone, you use it, you throw it in the landfill. So how can we start looking at our economy differently, looking at the waste stream in terms of opportunities around resources where you can take some of those products out and create new products, upcycling, but at the same time, innovation and jobs. So this Innovation Barn is a huge building. It's 36,000 square feet. And it used to be the barn that the cattle that the city had would be housed. And then after that was a vehicle maintenance facility. And now it's just a warehouse where there are bikes being stored for trips for kids. So we are taking that barn and we are going to make it ground zero for the circular economy. So we'll bring in trash. We'll have entrepreneurs. We'll put out calls to action for entrepreneurs to take this trash and turn it into products. Like, for example, glass. Grinding it down and making an additive into concrete. There's a great company called Rothy's, and they take plastic bottles and make them into shoes. I actually have them on my feet right now. So there's lots of opportunities to mine kind of the landfill and use that product for new products. So we'll have that. We'll have a event space where we'll rent it out. You have to have zero waste. So it'll teach people how you can do events in that way, but it will also bring people to the site to see what we're doing. We'll have a restaurant, a beer bar. UNC Charlotte will be there with classes, and then we'll have our offices. So we're really going to have this dynamic space where we're going to show off what the circular economy is by also not only having companies who are already doing those things, but then teaching people and bringing in new entrepreneurs to launch it. Once they grow out of our facility, they can launch those businesses throughout Charlotte.
Amy, why do you do this work?
Because it's fantastic. For me, it allows me to still be somewhat of an entrepreneur. I get to create and be innovative. I love working with different people. I love working with smart, different people in all these different organizations and finding how we can all win. The opportunity to do this Innovation Barn has been one of the most exciting projects I've ever been presented with or dreamt up or collaborated with in my professional career. So as you can tell, my voice, I think, just went up 2 octaves because I'm so excited about it. But I think it's going to transform Charlotte. I love Charlotte. I've been here since '96. It is just bursting with so much opportunity all the time. And to be a part of something that can transform what we're doing here is just very exciting.
Amy, let's talk about you and how you came to be who you are today. You grew up in Carmel, Indiana. What was Carmel like?
Carmel by the cornfields. So Carmel, Indiana actually has been rated one of the top small towns in the country to live in. It's an interesting suburb of Indianapolis because when they started introducing busing in Indianapolis, people who didn't want to be bused all over the city moved up to the suburbs. And so hence where Carmel really got started. And it was a very wealthy suburb where property taxes paid for the school system. And it's one of the best public school systems. I mean, they have a physics department, a Chinese department. It's huge, too. I mean, I think we had 3,000 people there when I was in school. But it was a great place to be from. They have, I think, I need to look this up, but I still believe they have the most state championships of any school. So if you had a kid who you wanted to get a scholarship, you moved up there. So it was a fun place to grow up, but it was still like we lived out in the woods, like the woods. I played in the woods all the time, right across the street from the railroad track, which is now the Monon Trail, which is this really cool trail from, I think it goes from 162nd all the way down to the center of town. So it walks right in front of my old house. So if you're ever on the Monon Trail, I lived like right there. I thought it was a great place to grow up.
It's one of the most segregated communities in Indiana, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. All growing up, I did not go to school with any African-American students until I went to Purdue.
Amy, you have a brother who had some challenges growing up.
Yes. So my brother was diabetic, juvenile diabetes. So I think he was 11 when he almost died. His blood sugar was over 900 count, went to the hospital. So his pancreas does not work. So that's type 1 diabetes. Type 2 is when you're older and you can manage it with drugs. So he's insulin dependent. It's a very tough age. You know, when you're 11, I think I was 12 or 13 when he was diagnosed, because you still want to drink Coke and eat candy like your friends. And every time he would end up in the hospital. They've made great strides in it since then. But at the time, all the focus went on my brother, you know, basically keeping him alive and taking care of him and managing this horrific disease that I sort of got ignored. And not because anyone wanted to ignore me. What I didn't realize I do now as a parent is how much behind the scenes, you know, my mom did to get people to pick me up from wherever I was. But you don't see that as a kid. You just sort of see nobody's around. So it gave me this resilience and this fierce independence. Like, I have taken care of myself. I detasseled corn when I was in 8th grade and got my first paycheck, and I think I've paid for all my clothes since then. So it was a tough time as a kid, but it really, I think, spurred in me that just sense of, I'm going to do this myself, and I'm an independent person. I can take care of myself.
You donated a kidney to your brother, didn't you?
I sure did. Her name was Lola, and we had a farewell party, and I had kidney bean dip, Bloody Marys, and organ music. I told him he needed to have like a welcoming party. I mean, come on.
How did that experience define you?
You know, it was interesting. I think having a sick brother your whole life, it was always like, someday you'll be giving your brother a kidney because that's just what you do. And so when it happened, what was interesting to me was more the reactions of other people, because to me, it was just that's what you do. Like, of course, that's what I'm going to do. It was never even a question. But I had so many people who were like, why would you do that? I don't think you should do that. Which shocked me that that just didn't even compute. So it really showed me true colors of other people who didn't agree with me for what I was doing, which I didn't even think that was a question. And then the ones who were overly supportive. Yeah, it was awful because I'm allergic to narcotics, so I couldn't take painkillers. But that's just what you do. It really it wasn't that big of a defining issue. It just sucked.
Amy, from Carmel High School, you went to Purdue University. Why Purdue?
Couple reasons. Because my dad loved IU, so you have to, go against your parent. And so I had to go to Purdue. And I hate IU. Still hate IU. And number 2, I loved math. And so I actually went to Purdue for actuarial science. Yes. And when I joined the actuary club, and I was the only extrovert, female, and English person, I realized maybe I'm in the wrong major, perhaps. I didn't stay with it for a couple reasons. Number 1, I joined the actuary club, and I was the only extrovert, female, and English or an American in the entire club. But second of all, I'm an auditory learner, and the classes, most of the teachers were Asian, and I could not understand them, so I had to rely on textbooks. I could not get through the major because I need to hear it and not see it. And so it was very challenging.
And you changed your major.
I did. I changed it to communications. I know that's very shocking.
You could be living a very different life as you stayed with actuarial sciences.
Yeah, just a tad. I could be a little bit more bored.
Amy, you were also social director of your sorority.
Yes, I was, which translates really well to today. So I've always been that person. It makes me giggle because I would be the one that would plan our spring break trips. And I literally would have 3 envelopes. One was gas money, one was food money, and one was hotel, because we needed to be able to get home. And when you're in Indiana, you drive everywhere. Like, we drove to Key West for spring break. So actually this year, funny side story, I I went to Carmel Elementary, Carmel Middle, Carmel High School. My son went to Carmel Middle here. We were both Carmel Cougars. But he had the same group of friends from elementary school. There were like 33 of these kids. So I decided and recruited a couple friends that I wanted to have one big epic graduation party. So I arranged all the mothers to come in. There were 29 moms to come to a meeting where I had my clipboard and my spreadsheet and sat down and said, all right, we want to have a graduation party for all these kids. So we have 3 hosts and we have above the line and below the line. We're going to do all this. You know, we're going to host the party. We're going to have a pig. We're going to, have a DJ, all that. If you guys want to contribute and be a part of it, we'll also add a tent, a dance floor, a photo booth, and all this. And so all the parents were in, all the moms were in. And then I threw out at the end, I said, and to make one of my dreams come true, I would like to have a flash mob. And the moms were like, excuse me? And I'm like, yes. So one of the moms was she's a dancer. So she did a choreography. So we had all the moms bust out into a 7-minute flash mob dance with Bruno Mars and Justin Timberlake and all the songs in the middle of the party. And then some of the girls participated well. It was fantastic. So yes, my social skills, all the way from Purdue, translate to today.
Amy, after college, you moved to Atlanta. What happened in Atlanta?
Yeah, so me and 2 of my friends decided we were looking at what city we wanted to move to. It was Chicago, Dallas, or Atlanta. Chicago was too cold. Dallas was too flat. Atlanta was just right. So we moved down there. We got waitressing jobs at Frankie's on the Prada, and that was a ton of fun, but clearly not a career path. So I went to the Chamber of Commerce, got the largest companies in Atlanta, and I just started sending my resume out. Now, this is back when you mailed them. There's no internet to be sending emails. And I got an interview with APCO in the A's, and I drove to their facility, and it was not in the nicest part of Atlanta. And I almost left, but there were 2 Mercedes in the parking lot. I'm like, well, it can't be that bad. And so I went in, interviewed for wayfinding communication. So basically telling you how to get through a hospital or how to drive around a hospital. And so I started at APCO.
And you were there for a few years.
6 years. So I did wayfinding for 2. They gave me a personality test, said you need to go into sales. And I remember going home and telling my boyfriend at the time, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this sales job. They want me to do Southern Georgia, Southern Alabama, and Southern Mississippi. I'm not going to make any money. I'll do it for 2 years. I'll learn and then move on. And he's like, okay. So then I went back in and I said, yeah, I'll take the job. And they're like, actually, we want a sales rep for the Carolinas, North and South Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. Would you like that? And I said, well, yeah. They said, well, you have to move there. I'm like, okay. My ex at the time worked at the Olympics, and they were over in 96. So we moved here, and I sold signs for 4 years.
And then you found your way to the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce.
I did. I quit right after I had my first child, Lily. Quit APCO and really wanted a job with people. I mean, I worked in an office by myself. I traveled all the time. And so I started working at the Chamber of Commerce selling advertising, and then just slowly worked my way up and eventually was group vice president over sales, marketing, and fundraising. It was awesome.
That did give you significant visibility and a network here in Charlotte.
Yes, I went from never being around in Charlotte to being in, the chamber is such a significant force in the community. And you meet everyone. I mean, all walks of life, all different companies. There's so many activities. At the time, I'm not sure where it's at now, it was the 4th largest chamber in the country. So it was such a fantastic opportunity to really grow that network and meet not only influencers, but people that I still connect with. I met you there, so you meet all kinds of walks of life at the chamber. It was a wonderful entree into Charlotte.
Amy, from there, you went to work for a large commercial construction company, but then you also started your own business enterprises. You have an entrepreneurial streak. Tell me about that work.
Yeah, I've always had this just interest in coming up. I think partly my brain doesn't stop. I'm always thinking of something. So I have on the side, one of my, hobbies is to write business plans. And so all through the years, I had always come up with all these different business ideas and things that I wanted to try. And so after I left the commercial construction company, I was like, oh, well, maybe instead of corporate life, I should start a beer, wine, art gallery. I mean, really? So the idea was to highlight local artists. And it really came from two places. One, my brother and my mom are both artists. I have lots of artists in my family. But I also served on the Arts and Science Council Board for 6 years. And I just saw so many fantastic artists in Charlotte that really didn't have an outlet for their artwork, and lots of people who bought crappy art from printed places. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could come up with a location where artists could put their artwork up? If it sells, we both make money. If it doesn't, I move them out and move in a new artist. And so that was kind of the concept. And the long-term goal was, I'm going to open these in every city, because you could celebrate all these local artists in all these cities. You know, you add the beer and the wine and the coffee so people would stay and linger. But what I skipped was, between opening that, growing it, figuring it all out, and then opening them around the country, you're getting milk at 11 o'clock, or you're getting pennies at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're managing retail employees. And I hated it. It did not challenge my mind. Once the idea was done and it was all built out, you're just running a retail store. I have such a love for those people now, because one of the things that I find is when you do that, everyone has an opinion all the time. So I at least 3 times a day I would hear, you know what you should do? You should paint that wall black. You know what you should do? You should carry gluten-free scones. You know what you should do? And it was just exhausting, and it wasn't any fun. I did not enjoy it.
If you write a book one day, what would you call it?
You know what you should do? But I did have some really fun things. For example, I did a big social media play for the DNC to try to get Jon Stewart to come to Fabo. And what's so interesting today, if you Google, like if I'm going into a meeting anywhere in the world and you Google my name, one of the first stories that comes up is Politico's waiting for her moment of zen. And it was the front page of Politico on me trying to get Jon Stewart to come to Fabo. So I'll walk into a meeting still, and they'll be like, Amy, I have a question for you. And I'm like, you're going to ask me if he came. Because everyone wanted to know, did he come to Fabo? And I'm like, he did not. But along the way, I met great people. I got a lot of coverage. That week was the busiest week I ever had at Fabo, because everyone came to wait to see if he would come. I did get to meet John Oliver. I have great pictures. He was a great guy. So it was really, really very fun. Oh, but on a side note, too, when I went to the White House for Envision America, they had to vet me because I was a stalker of Jon Stewart. And so Dan from the White House was like, yeah, we actually had to do a little digging on you once we found out you were a stalker. So in my book, that would be called, You Know What You Should Do. At the very end, I'll put the chapter on Jon Stewart, and I'll say to Jon Stewart, and you know what you can do? I'm just kidding. Yeah. We had John's John, where you could write notes to Jon Stewart, literally. And it was so funny because literally people would find out about it from all over the country and come in. So it was most fun, and I still get asked about it all the time.
Amy, Fabo was not your last entrepreneurial venture. There's one that is quite successful right now. Mm-hmm. What is that venture? Yep.
So I own a craft beer bar on the side with my business partner, Denise, and Tanks Tap. It's up at 7th Street Public Market. And everything I learned at Fabo, all the mistakes I made, I changed them and fixed them for Tanks Tap. And so I was sitting up at the market one day, I believe with, I think, Michael Smith from Center City Partners, and he was saying we wanted a beer wall in the market. And I'm looking around at all the people thinking, wow, you don't have to generate traffic? This is a great place. So I called up Denise and I said, hey, you want to open a beer bar with me? And she's like, sure. She was retired from her job. I said, well, you have to manage the people because I've got Envision Charlotte. So she manages the people and buys the beer because she's retired and she can go to all the breweries. And I do everything else. I do all the technology, payroll, marketing, events, all that kind of stuff. It works great. It's been 4 years. It's been a lot of fun.
Amy, you're a mom. You're running Envision Charlotte. You have this business, Tanks Tap. You throw epic parties. How do you do it?
Spreadsheet, manage my time, calendar on my phone. You know, like I said, my mind never turns off. So I have to satisfy this mind. Actually, many years ago, I took one of those tests, I think it was some corporate leadership thing. And it said I had high idea generation. Like I'm constantly generating ideas. And they said, so one of the things, you can never be a surgeon because surgeons actually have very low idea generation. So, I had to call my mom at 35 years old and tell her I was never going to be a surgeon because I have such high idea generation. So these ideas that are always percolating in my head, they have to come out. They have to manifest themselves. So they come out in crazy ways like businesses or epic parties, or I love themes to birthday parties or all kinds of things.
Amy, what's your dream job?
Well, I'm close to it right now. Close. I love Envision. It's very entrepreneurial. So I get to do what I do in terms of coming up with ideas and implementing them. And I love that. I think the Innovation Barn will be the biggest career thing it's the biggest thing I've ever embarked on, and it will be the biggest success that I've ever had because I think it's going to change Charlotte. And I love the idea of bringing lots of people up and in and seeing their success with it. So I'm super excited about that. If I didn't do Envision, my dream job would be to be able to take some of these business ideas I have and work with people and have them get going and start them. But it's funding. I guess I need some wealthy philanthropist that just loves my ideas and says, I'm just going to fund it. But, that's probably everyone's dream, right? So I'd love to see some more of these ideas come out of my head and become a reality.
Amy, what are you curious about?
If you go to the really deep core of my curiosity, it's really the purpose of not why we're here, but what I'm supposed to learn in this lifetime. Like I truly believe that we're all here for a learning, and it's all different. And whether it's forgiveness because I didn't have a great dad, or forgiveness over having to being upset that my brother was sick, which sounds terrible. But when you're a kid and somebody else is taking all the attention, whatever. I feel like there are lessons that I need to learn in this lifetime. So I'm constantly trying to figure out what those are. What am I missing? What am I not seeing because my psyche isn't ready to see yet? And I can tell you there are things now that I couldn't see 10 years ago. So what's going to be revealed that I need to learn? So I'm really curious about just learning as a person on what are my life lessons.
Is there a spiritual or philosophical framework that guides you?
So I am an ENFJ. And if you read in Myers-Briggs, it was really interesting when I was younger that it talked about one of the things that this personality type struggles with is spirituality, that you question everything. And so I grew up very staunch Lutheran, and it didn't make sense to me. So in college, I did take some theology classes. And then when I graduated, I read all these books around previous lives and reincarnation. And probably in my middle 20s, I came to what makes sense to me. I believe that there is something up there, some kind of higher energy. And I kind of feel like we keep coming back around. I don't necessarily know if it's reincarnation per se, but that we are becoming godlike, that we are learning lessons each time, and that we travel with the same souls and kind of make deals and swap, before we come back around to say, hey, can you help me with this in this lifetime? And so I'm very comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with the idea that this isn't the only chance we're getting, and we just keep coming back as energy and figuring this out and evolving as a soul and becoming better people. And so I feel comfort in that, and it's a guiding principle in that I feel that everyone needs to always become better. I have very high standards in myself, which bleeds into other people. I was telling a friend of mine, I'm like, how do I not be so demanding on other people? She goes, stop being so demanding on yourself. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So I guess that's a very long, windy road to say, that's what makes me comfortable, and that's the path that I walk down. And it's been, like I said, I found this in my mid-20s, and I'm comforted with that thought for spirituality for me.
Is there a lesson that you think you are relearning?
I do. I think forgiveness is one. I think not only forgiving other people, but forgiving myself. Like, I have a really hard time. Like, even in a day, if I think I'm lazy for a Saturday that I sat on the couch too long, I get annoyed with myself. Like, being a little bit less hard on myself. So I think forgiveness is a huge lesson for me. I think tolerance, and I mean tolerance in intellect. Like, I have a hard time if I don't think someone is being as smart as they can be or working as hard as they can be. I have an intolerance for that. So I think tolerance, and that's right now. I mean, 10 years ago, I went to this leadership thing, and basically I had an issue about being irrelevant. I was very young looking, and I was young at the time, and I'd get dismissed in meetings, and I'd get all puffy and have to show my relevance. That doesn't bother me anymore. Like, I can sometimes hear it creeping up. I'm like, oh, please just stop talking. So I think every 3, 5, 10 years, there's all these new things that creep up that I'm like, oh, yeah, I need to work on that now. And it's a conscious decision on the things that I am always trying to work on to be a better person.
Do you think there's a collective consciousness in which society is constantly relearning lessons?
Yes, absolutely. I think we all just keep coming back around, and that's why, yeah, there's some drags. But actually, I have this belief that really bad people teach really good people lessons. And so maybe they made that deal that this time around they're going to be a bad person. So I think in the bigger picture, yes, I think we just keep getting better and better, better if you look at the whole. And there are dips. Like right now we are in the United States clearly in a little bit of a dip. But overall, yes, I think collectively we are all getting better.
What's the deal you want to make for the next go-around? I
don't know. I'm a little worried because this has been such a fantastic life that I don't want to chance karma, but I'm afraid that like next time around is going to have to be harder because this has been so spectacular. There's a book called Many Lives, Many Masters. And it literally, I don't know that I believe all of what's in it. It rocked my world, but it fundamentally just resonated internally that I was like, yes, this is what makes sense. This is it. And so I've read a million different books around that one, but I actually just gave it to my son at the beginning of this year. I'm like, I would like you to read this. And he read it, and he's very science-based, so he has a hard time with religion because he's like, he loves science, which makes sense. But I'm like, yeah, that's what it is.
Amy, do you have a sense of your own previous lives?
I think there are people that I have known before, and that in different ways beyond this lifetime. And, I've always done the crazy things of speaking to mediums or different people. And so it's been interesting, some of the lives that they've said I've had in terms of people who I had issues with back then and still have issues with right now. So clearly still working on some of those. So, I think it's fun. Do I think it's serious? I don't know. But there are people that I have known longer than just the year or 5 or 10. I have known them longer. So my favorite quote is, you are exactly where you want to be. So you have to take ownership of where you are. And I think there are times when I've met people and they like stir in me that moment of, I'm exactly where I need to be. And you came at the exact moment again. We've been here before. And someone once said to me, the people you are indifferent to, ignore them. The people you hate and the people you love, you gravitate towards them. That's where you're going to find your lessons. And it is hard with the people that you really dislike to really go and seek them out and spend time with them. And I do. I don't like it. And I may dislike them more, but I try to find out what it is. And sometimes I do believe we've been here before. So I do think, love and hate, they're very fine lines, but that is where you should spend your time, not with people who you are indifferent to. And again, you are exactly where you want to be.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Amy Aussieker is Executive Director of Envision Charlotte. She earned a bachelor's degree in communications from Purdue University. And now, a personal word. Amy Aussieker is pursuing big ideas in this lifetime, sensing she might yet have another go. She is not alone. Millions of people take comfort that we have more than one life to live. There is something incredibly attractive about reincarnation. We get to travel through time, trying again. We get to renew love affairs. We get to live forever. Belief in reincarnation goes way back. The idea of transmigration, the continuation of a person's soul in one human body after another, appears in the earliest recorded religious texts. In the East, every major Indian religion tells us that an aspect of every human being dies and is reborn in an interconnected cycle of existence. Jains believe in an eternal soul that passes through cycles of death and rebirth into higher or lower bodily forms based on accumulated karma. The Hindu Upanishads speak of reincarnation as a journey of self-knowledge. Buddhism sees the nature of existence as a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Chinese Taoism says that birth is not a beginning, and death is not an end. Reincarnation is an ancient theme in the West as well. Pythagoras formed societies in Greece to share the idea. Virgil wrote about souls who are reborn. Celts and Vikings believed in souls that returned. So do African Yoruba, Native American Algonquin, Cherokee, and Inuit tribes, and modern-day Scientologists. Although the dominant religions of the West, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, reject reincarnation as heresy, believing that a soul is either damned or saved forever in the afterlife, each has esoteric traditions: Jewish Kabbalists, Christian Gnostics, and Muslim Gulats that embrace the idea of past lives and an individual entering a new existence after the death of the body. Reincarnation has long been explored in popular culture, in literature, music, and movies, from the poem Metempsychosis, written by John Donne, The Progress of the Soul, to the song Cosmic Dancer by T-Rex, to films such as What Dreams May Come and Cloud Atlas. Reincarnation is central to the New Age movement. Mediums and therapists claim lessons learned from past lives can clear fears and insecurities in one's current life. Scientists have weighed in, investigating reports of young children who claim to have remembered past lives and matched them to the facts of a deceased person's life that the children would seem to not otherwise be able to know. Amy and I share this in common. In this life, we have led many lives and met many masters. We have lived in many places, encountered many people, launched new careers, started many ventures, pursued many interests. We have learned a few lessons along the way. Have I met people who I felt that I have met before? Yes. In at least one instance, the feeling was overwhelming. The moment I met her, I felt I knew her, and the relationship over 2 years was a montage of scenes and emotions I felt I had experienced before. A parapsychologist would have had a field day measuring everything that I felt. Premonitions, to deja vu, to telepathy. What was it about? Who knows? I have had similar, if not as intense, feelings with other people I've met. Is reincarnation an explanation? I don't think it needs to be. There are so many memory archetypes we carry with us that can explain how we respond to people. But what if we are traveling through life, encountering souls we have met before and will meet again? What if karma is a thing? Then how awesome would that be? We would have more reason than we do to practice compassion, to show kindness to every life form. We would have more reason than we do to be brave, ready to take risks for causes greater than ourselves. Here is what I do believe. The great task in life is to be true to ourselves, to show compassion to all life forms, and to be brave, whether we have an eternal soul or not, whether we reincarnate or not. Amy Aussieker reminded me of that lesson once again. This is Mark Paris, and you've been listening to On Life and Meaning. Additional support for this podcast is provided by the UNC College of Arts and Architecture, celebrating a decade of creative education in the arts and design. Thank you to our funding partners and to my teammates, Andy Go, producer of the show, and to Chris Curriton, art and media director. This is how you can help. Please write a review on iTunes. It helps us grow our audience. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And become a patron. We are on Patreon, a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to support what you value at a level you choose. Visit us also on our website on lifeandmeaning.com. Thank you for listening.